However, what we saw was that the tolerance or acceptability for this type of advertising was phenomenal, actually. We're kind of always thinking about when we're planning new ad formats or iterating on existing ad formats. So how can we make this better? What we think of as good advertising is advertising which feels integrated, it feels relevant to our experience.
Hi everybody, welcome to the second episode of Stream Talks, where today I'll be talking to advertising product manager at Rakuten TV, Julia.
Hi Zara, I'm responsible for ads product management at Rakuten TV. So this involves setting the ads product strategy and roadmap as well for everything advertising related. It would involve the users who are looking at the ads, watching the ads, and the advertisers who are paying for their ads. So there's two kind of main target audiences.
And by users, you mean people that are actually watching Rakuten TV on the app.
Exactly.
That can be on a TV or on any kind of device, right?
Yep. So primarily smart TV is where users are watching our content, our movies or our channels. And our content is available, a large majority is available for free with ads. So users can watch content, but they also have to watch adverts. That's how we make our money and are able to sustain that.
Oh, that seems like a really interesting kind of dynamic that you have to work with. And so what would you say actually makes a good ad experience on CTV, on an app like Rakuten TV, for example?
For sure. So I think it's important that advertising feels natural. Advertising should be integrated into the experience. It should be relevant to the context and environment so that it fits in with your viewing experience. Not too repetitive as well. And yeah, I guess designed for the big screen, designed for the TV.
And obviously advertising on kind of streaming platforms has been around for a while, I would say, but it's only until recently that we've got people, for example, Netflix and Amazon, they've also introduced kind of ad-tiered, and Disney, for example, they've also introduced ad-tiered experiences for their users. Would you say that this, like, how do you actually strike the balance between a good user experience and also a good advertising kind of revenue for the advertising side?
Yeah, totally. It's a really interesting topic and something we have to consider all the time with every project, because we want to make sure that the end user, the person who's watching the ads, is happy and the advertiser's happy as well. What we try to consider is having a fair value exchange, right? So the user is happy to be paying with their time if they feel like what they're getting in return is worth it, and that the way that they're paying by watching ads is acceptable to them as well. So we do a lot of different things. We focus on having a really nice user experience in our app. We focus on having amazing content so that the user is happy to be there, happy to be paying with their time. We also work with very premium high-end advertisers, and we try to create advertising experiences which are value-adding as well. To be honest, it's not in anyone's interest, including the advertiser, if the experience feels in any way spammy. It should be premium, it should be transparent for everyone involved.
I think that's really interesting, and I completely agree with you on that. My one question now is actually, obviously, apps like Rakuten TV, they've got millions of users all across Europe. So how do you actually measure what makes a good user experience and a good balance?
Very good question. We have lots of data being a digital platform. But obviously, when you look at things like, I don't know, view time, because you've changed something in the advertising experience, there's also so many other variables at play which might be influencing the data which we see. We are lucky enough to have an A/B testing tool, which enables us to test new features and understand in a controlled environment what is the actual impact of this new feature on advertising, for example, on any like viewing metric, which is very cool. So we usually pilot new features using that feature, using that platform to have an understanding of how they might be impacting other metrics, and also if we can iterate on them to kind of bring down if there's any area which is being negatively impacted, for instance, to find that balance that you're describing. We also collect user feedback actively. One of my jobs is to read user comments, including user complaints, but also including positive comments regarding advertising. So we get a lot of qualitative information about users' experience of advertising, and we try to take that on board and turn it into features and strategy and planning. There's this feedback loop always going on.
That's really interesting, and I guess everything kind of informs each other. There's kind of a value exchange, if you will, going on in this kind of aspect.
Exactly.
So then if we're looking in terms of product development that you're working on and kind of bringing in new ad formats, how do you really go about doing that? What's your approach in terms of doing that?
So there's a lot involved with launching a new ad format. Our sales team, for instance, are very helpful in identifying opportunities. We also identify opportunities ourselves. We do lots of benchmarking. We try to listen to everyone in the company and everything that we read about the industry to understand kind of what's happening. We recently launched new ad formats, one on the home screen called the billboard, and pause ads and screensaver ads on the app sponsor ad format as well, in response to benchmarking. So we understood that there were various platforms which had started to integrate such formats, and they were being built as standards by the 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗁, which meant that there was demand for these ad formats, essentially. Advertisers were interested in working with CTV in new and creative ways, so using the big screen as it is to kind of share their message, tell their story, besides just traditional video.
I think that's really interesting because it's kind of, you're bringing in the kind of traditional out-of-home experience, which is what you would normally think of as a billboard,
right?
Exactly, but then bringing it to the big screen. So I think it's quite interesting how the industry is moving towards this kind of direction of bringing the old back, but in a kind of new way. There was a research report done last year with Annalect, and I think that had some really interesting results and kind of also could be something that you'd look at to kind of inform what the market is feeling, that's not only revolving around Rakuten TV users, but actually Europe in general.
This study was amazing, to be honest, because we just launched this new product. So it was so cool to get so much feedback about what was users' experience of the new product, what was their feelings, their sentiment towards it, how could we improve this new product. The feature being tested was our billboard, so home screen advertising, right? Quite sort of there when you open the Rakuten TV app, which is a benefit, but it could potentially be a drawback as well. However, what we saw was that the tolerance or acceptability for this type of advertising was phenomenal, actually. Advertisers, the majority of users did not find this advertising to be annoying, did not find it to be intrusive on their experience, and they found it to be well integrated. I think it was around 70% of users were saying this, so this was great. We also, in the survey, asked users about what makes advertising more acceptable, more appealing. And the feedback we got from that was also really interesting as well. And it's what we're kind of always thinking about when we're planning new ad formats or iterating on existing ad formats. So how can we make this better? How can we make it a fairer value exchange for the user who's watching that?
So following on from the Annalect report, where you've got all of these really amazing new insights about how users are responding to different ad formats, how do you then move forward from that and actually go the next step further?
So one thing which we learned was about how to make advertising more appealing to users, right? That was one of the pieces of information that we got from the survey. One insight was about how well integrated they are into the platform. We know this already. I mentioned it earlier. I think that what we think of as good advertising is advertising which feels integrated, it feels relevant to our experience. Enter contextual signals, right?
Yeah.
So one key thing with CTV is that it's more than one user who's watching the TV normally. So when you're thinking about planning a campaign, you need to think about everyone in that room. You need to think about what is that viewing experience in order to successfully plan a campaign in the majority of cases, right? Let's say it's I don't know, approaching dinner time and you're a food delivery advertiser, you don't necessarily need to think about targeting an individual so much as targeting a contextual environment. Maybe you're trying to, as I mentioned, you might be a food delivery advertiser and planning your campaign around dinner time or just approaching dinner time. Or you might be maybe even trying to create a contextual moment which is highly targeted, such as targeting a campaign which is related to a film. Maybe it's straight after a scene, you know, a coffee ad straight after a scene in a cafe or watching Friends or whatever.
So in layman's terms, what we're talking about is with CTV in particular, it's difficult to kind of measure the people that you're actually showing the ads to. Why? Because they're watching probably from the living room. You can't really know who's in there, but you've got a kind of idea on a kind of household level what the people or the interests and the kind of demographics. And when we're talking about contextual targeting, we're talking about kind of the context in which somebody is watching an ad.
Contextual advertising is crucial. So thinking about what's the environment that ad is being shown in, what's the content around it, what's the time of day. We have all kinds of signals beyond identity information in order to target an ad and make the ad as relevant to the context as possible so that it's adding value for the user who's watching it because it makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. I certainly wouldn't want for myself to be kind of receiving ads for golf clubs, for example, you know.
Not a golfer?
I mean, I'm not a golfer actually, but I think that there can be values to the end user of having this as well as for the advertiser, which is a really nice thing. So
yeah, for sure. It's in the interest of everyone, you know?
Absolutely. Right. So we've talked a little bit about kind of contextual targeting and how it actually works in practice now. I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a change, and I'm actually going to ask you a few questions regarding your own film tastes.
Sure.
So beginning with, what is your official favourite film?
My official favourite film, I would say, is Magnolia.
Oh.
So it's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Artsy.
And it's got a lot going on. It's one of these stories where you've got different characters, but then at the end, all of their stories connect. You know, I love this.
I'll add that to my list.
Tom Cruise in the manosphere, very relevant, actually relevant.
Yeah, very relevant at the moment, actually. But then actually, what's your real favourite film?
My partner says that your real favourite film is the film that you've watched the most times. So
I would agree with that.
Maybe Clueless?
Also very iconic choice. So I really love that from you. And then finally, what is a kind of movie quote that lives in your head all the time that you always kind of use as a reference point for you?
Ooh, I'm not sure if there's one that I live by, but in my family we like to quote Hot Fuzz a lot.
A British cult classic.
A British cult classic, exactly. So like not like catching them killers then. Is something that sticks in my head a lot. I'm always saying it to my family.
No, that's brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Julia. I'll leave you alone with the questions now. It's been a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And to everybody else, thank you for joining. We'll see you at the next episode.